In an earlier video I showed creating a version of chess using AI. The game used the JavaScript framework React and worked okay except when playing against a computer. Its response was taken at random from the available valid moves, giving it a very poor strategy. In this video I'm going to look at potentially improving that strategy by making ChatGPT the opponent. Predictive AI isn't known for its chess playing abilities, but AI assures me that ChatGPT can play chess. So let's see how it does. I'm going to use Claude Code to help me wire up the AI rather than Copilot, which I use for the first version of the code, but might use Copilot to ask some general questions about the project. So first I asked how would I use ChatGPT to make a chess move from a React app. Copilot came back and said I would need to pass the current board state as an FEN string to ChatGPT. ChatGPT can then respond with the move in algebraic notation. So going into Claude Code, I opened up my React Chess project and ran it up in the Claude Code browser. I asked Claude how to get the current board state as an FEN. Claude said that the chess.js library which I'm using has a function I can call that returns this called .fen. So adding that to the code is a one-liner as shown. Next I asked Claude how I would write a function to call the ChatGPT API. It answered I would need a small server function to call the API. The API key would be held in a .env file, so it's not exposed to the end user. So I asked it to go ahead and create this. The code was generated in a file server.js, and it explained the syntax for the .env file where the API key goes. So looking at the server.js function is quite straightforward and adds an endpoint that calls the ChatGPT API, stating the model and the prompt to ask the AI, including the FEN string. There is some exception handling for if it fails. The prompt tells the AI what is needed and how to respond using algebraic notation. Next I added a ChatGPT API key to the .env file and asked Claude to check if it worked. It's an old key that I used when the ChatGPT API first came out, so that meant it might not work anymore. OpenAI responded saying I'd exceeded my current quota. When I used the key before, the ChatGPT API was free for limited use, but now no longer. So going to ChatGPT, I asked to be reminded how to get API keys. It suggested using a cheat model, GPT-4o mini, rather than GPT-4. So logging into OpenAI, I created a new API key and just added $5 to it, turning off auto recharge. Then checking my balance, it showed $5 and auto recharge turned off, so I don't get hit by any large bills. Then I added a new key to the code and asked Claude to try again with that. This time it worked and the API returned a move. It also confirmed I was using the GPT-4o mini low-cost model. I then asked Claude to use the ChatGPT server function to make the move, rather than the random move it was using before. I asked it to retry if the move returned was invalid. Next I asked Claude to check the code was working, using ChatGPT to play black. It started playing the game to test the code using both players. After the first black move though, the code stalled. ChatGPT said the GPT-4o mini model wasn't responding correctly. So I asked it what other models were available. It responded with quite a list. I decided to use ChatGPT 4.1 as this would be cheaper than GPT-5 models and asked it to switch to this. It tested with this model. This time the model responded correctly and it said it was working more reliably. So I asked it if the game was ready to play and it responded yes. So opening the game in the full browser window, I started playing a game with me playing white and ChatGPT playing black. Its opening was okay, but then it took a pawn with its bishop and lost its bishop for the pawn. Not a great start. It castled okay, but then took a pawn with its rook, losing the rook. Then it moved its queen into the first column, but it was unguarded, so it lost its queen. At this point it stopped responding with moves. Maybe it took its back home. So going back to Claude, I said GPT 4.1 wasn't so good at chess. What model might be better? It responded suggesting GPT 3.5 Turbo Instruct might play better, but I'll leave that for another day. So going back to the code, Claude has added a method fetch AI move in a retry loop. This calls the server.js endpoint chess-move, and in there is the code to call the ChatGPT API chat endpoint. Looking at the cost of my experiment on OpenAI, I'd made 30 requests using about 2,300 tokens, and this hasn't registered any cost so far. So Claude Code has modified my React Chess app to use the OpenAI API successfully. But predictive AI isn't very good at playing chess yet, certainly on the model that I used. It will be interesting to see if this improves in the future. Perhaps ChatGPT 5 would be better, and I might give this a go at a later date. Hope that was interesting, and thanks for watching.